In 2016, the Telegraph reported that putting the wrong fuel in your car can cause lumpy, erratic acceleration, misfires, and excessive smoke from the exhaust. Misfueling your body with refined carbohydrates can create a volatile mood, energy levels, cause your brain to misfire, and leave you bloated and gassy. Smart carbohydrates increase your energy, they improve your mental focus, and they increase your peace of mind. So let's find out how that all works today. So the first question has to be, what is a carbohydrate? They are simple and complex sugars that are broken down by enzymes in your body to make fuel, or to store for fuel for the future, which we know as fat. They come in 3 different forms: mono, di, and polysaccharides. Monosaccharides are the most simple sugars, and polysaccharides are the most complex. They're long strings of saccharides or sugars that are all strung together. Complex carbohydrates are our smart carbohydrates. They make up the vast majority of our fiber. They help us to feel full and stay full. And they provide long, steady streams of energy. They're found in whole grains and fruits and vegetables. And in contrast, simple carbohydrates just spike your blood sugar and then drop you off. They give you that temporary high followed by a big crash that causes your mood and energy to go up and down like a yo-yo. A study conducted from 1988 to 1994 concluded that Americans replaced their nutrient-dense foods with high carbohydrate, nutrient-poor foods. As a result, we consume our calories from foods that are low in micronutrients, vitamins, and good cholesterol. They're also high in homocysteine concentrations, which are all increase our risk for factors of cardiovascular events like strokes and heart attacks. They also increase our risk for certain types of dementia, such as Alzheimer's. Let's talk for a moment about refined sugars and carbohydrates. Sugars occur naturally in the food that we eat. We find them everywhere, from fruits and vegetables to candy and ketchup. Some of those are natural sugars, and some of them are refined. Typically, refined sugars come from cane and beet sugar, whereas natural sugars occur in things like fruit. Cane and beet sugar are often genetically modified. Refined carbohydrates come from whole foods that have been stripped of all their nutrients. And a classic example of this would be brown rice. Brown rice contains bran, germ, and something called the endosperm. The bran and the germ are packed with nutrients like B vitamins, E vitamins, trace minerals, and plant nutrients that are necessary for energy production. The bran and the germ are removed during processing, which takes away the fiber, the vitamins, and the minerals, and all of the plant nutrients, leaving only the carbohydrate-rich endosperm and a couple of little nutrients, but nothing compared to the whole grain. The rice seed is then polished, and because most of the nutrients have been removed, man-made B vitamins are added back into the rice to make it nutritious. In the past, around the beginning of the century, our consumption of refined sugars and carbohydrates was relatively low. In the early 1900s, it was common for people to eat around 19 pounds of sugar per person per year. Today, that number is more like 180 to 300 pounds per person per year. We currently produce 74 pounds of beet sugar every year for every man, woman, and child in America. And the demand for that is so high that that number is actually likely to increase rather than decrease. That increase in our sugar consumption began in earnest in the 1970s when President Nixon asked the USDA to devise a way to keep food costs on an even keel. At the time, WIC was created, which made cheap sugar-filled foods available to the masses so that nobody would go hungry. In 1966, high fructose corn syrup was created in Japan and then introduced into America in 1975. It was cheap, to make, and it was added to nearly all of our produced foods. So when you go to the grocery store today, it's really hard to find those items. When you go looking, like ketchup and yogurt and anything that's been processed has added sugars in it. Shortly afterwards, we were encouraged by the American Medical Association and the American Heart Association to reduce all the fat from our diet. They said it was bad for us. And the resulting processed food that they made actually tasted like cardboard. It was pretty awful. So they added sugar to it to make it more palatable. And then finally, we took the fiber out of the food so that we could extend the shelf life of the products. And those few steps took our aisles that were full of food that was nutritious and replaced them with foods that were high in sugar and devoid of nutrients, and stripped us in the process of our health. The health concerns that are associated with the refined sugars and carbohydrates are really well documented. In addition to causing problems with brain health, which we'll address in a few minutes, we know that they depress the immune system, cause glucose levels to spike and plummet. They increase our risk of diabetes, obesity, and heart disease. They can cause chromium deficiencies, accelerate our aging. We know they cause tooth decay, increase stress. And so they're just in general not good for us. In comparison to that, we have complex carbohydrates. They're made up of long chains of multiple sugars, and in theory, these long chain complex carbohydrates take much longer to digest and don't cause that spike in blood sugar. Since technically white bread is actually a complex carbohydrate but raises blood sugar very, very quickly, we do need to clarify the statement. So the best complex carbohydrates have not been adulterated by harsh processing methods. Instead, they are complete foods that are still rich in all their vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. They consist of whole grains like brown rice, whole wheat, and steel-cut oats, and also vegetables like potatoes and parsnips, squash, beans, peas, and lentils. Did you know that your carbohydrates are actually fiber? They're a complex carbohydrate, and fiber is the key to keeping your blood sugar under control, or at least one of them. Wherever you find sugar in nature, you find plenty of fiber. Have you seen a sugar cane? It's basically a stick. Now, fiber helps to reduce the rate of carbohydrate absorption in your digestive tract, which reduces your insulin response. It also stops some of your free fatty acids from being absorbed by the colon, and those are then metabolized by bacteria in your colon, and they also work to suppress insulin. Now, I'm going to explain to you in just a moment why that is so important and so critical when it comes to brain health. But I also want you to know that fiber increases the speed at which the contents of your digestive tract reach your ileum, which is part of your digestive tract, and that raises your satiety hormone, and it tells you, I've had enough, it's time for me to stop eating. There are two types of fiber, soluble and insoluble. This is the part of the plant that cannot be broken down. This insoluble fiber can't be broken down by our human enzymes. This one works like a bulking agent and a sort of soft Brillo pad for our intestines that cleans it out and strengthens the muscles as it goes. It helps us to get rid of our excess hormones and excess cholesterol, and also helps us to manage the pH of our digestive tract by keeping acidic substances locked into its fiber network. This type of fiber isn't digested by our enzymes, but it is digested by our good bacteria in our gut. They break it down into something called a short chain fatty acid in the large intestine, so that the large intestine has the fuel that it needs for energy production and cell replication. Fantastic food sources of insoluble fiber include dark leafy greens, fruit and vegetable skins, wheat bran, corn bran, and nut and seed skins. The other type of fiber is soluble fiber. One way that the liver likes to get rid of excess waste like estrogen and testosterone and environmental pollution is by converting it to bile so that it can be removed. So we know that bile also helps us to break down fats in the diet. So it has dual purposes. Soluble fiber binds to those fatty acids in the old bile, and then it carries them out of the body when you go to the bathroom. Fiber helps us to clear waste, and it forces the liver to regenerate and then generate new bile, which is very, very healthy for liver function. Soluble fiber regulates and slows bowel transit time by slowing the absorption of nutrients. It also slows the absorption of sugar. When you eat whole fruits or vegetables, you get fiber with the carbohydrate that slows down the absorption of sugar. Soluble fiber is marvelous because it helps to minimize sugar and insulin spikes, which disrupts the healthy functioning of our blood sugar. Excellent sources for soluble fiber include oats, barley, flax seeds, fruits and vegetables, and psyllium husk. Insoluble fiber doesn't have water attached to it, but soluble fiber does, and so that helps to bring water into the digestive tract and keep things moving through smoothly. Now, we cannot talk about carbohydrates without touching on the prevalence of type 2 diabetes. Our excessive intake of refined sugar and carbohydrates is one of the biggest reasons behind the rise in this lifestyle disease. It's not the only one, but it definitely contributes. Now, I don't personally recommend that anybody has any more than 16 grams or 4 teaspoons of added sugars per day. And let me tell you about insulin for a minute. It is a hormone that's released by your pancreas, and it's supposed to unlock your cells and let the blood glucose in so that it can be turned into energy in your body. Now, when you eat large amounts of sugar, usually all in one go, it causes this spike in insulin production. And when you have too many insulin spikes for too long, then your body gets out of balance, it becomes insulin resistance, and you can develop diabetes. Let's take a minute to talk about insulin and your brain health or dementia risk. Insulin resistance happens when your body no longer responds to the insulin. So it's pounding on the cells to let the sugar in, but the body doesn't respond to it. That in turn elevates your blood sugar levels. Developing type 2 diabetes, we know, is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. And it's been suggested actually that Alzheimer's be labeled as type 3 diabetes because of the decrease in insulin sensitivity in Alzheimer's disease patients' brains. In his book, The End of Alzheimer's, Dr. Dale Bredesen does an excellent job of describing this, and so I just want to read you what he writes. He says, we humans evolved to handle only small amounts of sugars, about 15 grams per day, less than half the amount that you would find in a 12-ounce soft drink. He says sugar is like fire. It's a source of energy, but it's very dangerous. If you have a fireplace in your home, the amount of wood and the size of the fire needed to heat it depends on the size of the house. Less wood, smaller fire if your house is small, but more wood, bigger fire if your house is large. Now imagine that you shrink your house by 90%, which is essentially what happens when we move less, as is true of sedentary living Americans. We need less energy. That makes your fireplace effectively 10 times as large. You've shrunk your house, and the size of your fire now effectively becomes larger because of that. So if you keep pouring on the wood and stoking the fire, then your house would quickly become unbearably hot, the fire might escape the fireplace, and you would do everything possible to keep your house from burning down. That is the stress that most of us are now experiencing. Our bodies recognize sugar as poisonous and therefore rapidly activate multiple mechanisms to reduce its concentration in our blood and tissues. For one thing, we store the extra energy as fat, which produces brain-damaging factors called adipokines. But that still leaves our bloodstream awash in sugar, specifically glucose. The glucose molecules attach to many proteins, inhibiting their functioning just as egregiously, he says, as if an octopus attached itself to a pole vaulter. Our cells respond to the flood of glucose by increasing the production of insulin, which reduces the glucose by, among other strategies, pushing it into the cells. But your body faced with chronically high insulin levels, simply turns down the response and you become resistant to the effects of insulin. And insulin is intimately related to Alzheimer's disease by several mechanisms. For example, after insulin molecules do their job and lower the glucose, the body must degrade the insulin to prevent dropping blood glucose too low. And it does that via an enzyme called insulin degrading enzyme, or IDE. Guess what else the IDE degrades? Amyloid, the protein fragment in the sticky synapse destroying plaques in Alzheimer's disease. But the enzyme can't do both things at the same time. So if IDE is breaking down insulin, then it can't break down amyloid any more than a firefighter can battle a blaze at the north end of town if he or she is raining water down on a conflagration at the south end. By diverting IDE from destroying amyloid, chronically high levels of insulin increase the risk for Alzheimer's disease. In an interview with Maria Shriver, he said that one of the best tests you can get is fasting insulin, because then knowing what your fasting insulin is can tell you whether or not you're on the way to prediabetes. It's an early marker, and it's going to help you if you know. Information is just information, so if you find out that you are potentially pre-diabetic, then you can do an awful lot to protect your health from today, moving forward and into the future. Improving your insulin sensitivity is of paramount importance if you're going to protect your brain from dementia in the future. Here are a few tips that Healthline gives us to help us achieve that. The first thing you can do is get some good quality sleep, and that's because poor sleep can reduce insulin sensitivity and blood sugar regulation. Exercise moves sugar into the muscles for storage, and it promotes an immediate increase in insulin sensitivity, which lasts 2 to 48 hours depending on the type of exercise that you're doing. Reducing your stress is helpful because it affects your ability to regulate your blood sugar. Losing weight, especially belly fat, is important because the belly fat can produce hormones that promote insulin resistance in the muscles and the liver. You can also eat more soluble fiber. We talked about how that regulates it. Adding colorful fruits and vegetables to your diet also helps. There are spices like fenugreek, turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, and garlic. They are all beneficial in a variety of ways, so including those in your diet can help. Drinking green tea is important because it significantly reduces fasting blood sugar and increases insulin sensitivity. Apple cider vinegar is marvelous. It can increase insulin sensitivity by 34% during a high carb meal in people who are insulin resistant. And then, of course, cutting down those refined carbohydrates and sugars and choosing low glycemic foods can be beneficial. We'll discuss that a little bit more in a moment so you understand what that is. Avoiding trans fats is beneficial. Studies are kind of mixed on human beings as to whether trans fats impact blood sugar and insulin resistance, but they are a risk factor for so many other health problems that they are certainly worth avoiding, just on the off chance they will also help with the insulin piece. And then chromium, some supplements help too, like chromium, magnesium, berberine, and resveratrol. They're all worth looking into. Fasting for at least 12 hours between dinner and breakfast the next day may also be beneficial. It can give your body a break from breaking down insulin and then allow your body to work on cleaning up those amyloid plaques while you sleep. The other thing that can really impact your brain health is hypoglycemia and reactive hypoglycemia. It has a connection to anxiety feelings that you may be experiencing. I know from firsthand experience that panic and anxiety can generate some horrifying symptoms that feel like a heart attack. They can crop up after eating, after exercise, or even after falling asleep. Maybe you can relate to that sensation of clammy hands, a pounding heart, nausea and confusion, all while you tremble all over. And even though all of those symptoms are classically associated with a panic attack, they are also associated with low blood sugar, and it can be to blame. So hypoglycemia is what happens when your blood sugar gets too low during periods of fasting, for example, overnight, or if you go long periods in the day without eating. Reactive hypoglycemia, on the other hand, occurs after a meal, usually within about 4 hours of eating. WebMD tells us that it probably happens after carbohydrate-heavy meals, during which your body produces an excessive amount of insulin even after you finish digesting your food. So your body's just still producing the insulin. They also said it may occur as a result of tumors, alcohol, surgeries like gastric bypass, or ulcer treatments, and possibly as a result of some metabolic diseases. Either way, whatever the process is, that high level of insulin without any sugars to process can drive your blood sugar too low. It's like a diabetic taking their insulin and it driving their blood sugar down too low because they have too much in their system. So balancing your blood sugar and giving up refined carbohydrates and sugary drinks could be the key to alleviating that sensation of alarm and panic that you're experiencing. Small meals and snacks every 3 hours that include clean proteins, healthy fats, and smart carbohydrates are a fantastic way for you to keep your sugar steady and your emotions in check. Now, a note for a moment about exercise. It's always recommended as a positive change to help you maintain and manage your blood sugar, but it can trigger a reactive hypoglycemic episode. So to prevent a panic attack being brought on at the gym by intense exercise, which is something that I used to deal with, the Natural Athlete Club suggests eating smart, low glycemic carbs within 10 minutes before your exercise. Now, if that doesn't work and you end up having a panic attack anyway or experience anxious symptoms, they say that you can also simply try avoiding carbohydrates for 90 minutes before working out. One of those two things should work for you so that you can exercise and also keep your blood sugar steady. Now, smart carbohydrate choices include organic whole grains, vegetables, and fruits. And because exposure to herbicides and pesticides correlates to an increased risk of blood sugar dysregulation, organic foods are really essential for managing blood sugar. The next thing I want to take a few minutes and talk to you about is the glycemic index and the glycemic load. So we know that the glycemic index helps people to manage their blood sugar and lose weight. We also know that it's fabulous for increasing our body's sensitivity to insulin and improving diabetes and and reducing your risk, of heart disease. We know it can improve your blood cholesterol levels. We know it can reduce your hunger and keep you feeling fuller for longer. And they also have the ability, the low glycemic index foods also have the ability to produce prolonged physical endurance and are a great way to refuel your carbohydrate stores after you exercise. Initially, a lot of focus was put on the low glycemic index and eating low glycemic index foods, but then further studies and research produced an adaptation of this called the glycemic load. The glycemic load measures how much our blood sugar rises after we eat a carbohydrate. The lower the number, the better. So foods with a low glycemic index are better for us. They consider high glycemic index foods to be ones that are over 70, and ones that are of a medium GI glycemic index to be 56 to 69, and a low glycemic index food would be 55 and under. The glycemic load is obtained by multiplying the quality of carbohydrate in a given food, which is the glycemic index, by the amount of carbohydrate in that serving of food. So a high glycemic load would be higher than 20, a medium glycemic load would be 11 to 19, and a low glycemic load would be 10 or under. The Linus Pauling Institute up in Oregon demonstrates how this works by comparing a donut to a serving of watermelon. The glycemic index of watermelon is 76, which is as high as the glycemic index level of a donut. But one serving of watermelon provides 11 grams of available carbohydrates, while a medium donut provides 23, so more than double the grams of available carbohydrates. The serving of a watermelon then has a glycemic load of 8, while a donut has a glycemic load of 17. So I also want you to think about the nutritional value of watermelon compared to a donut. Watermelons are rich in vitamin C, copper, biotin, and vitamins A, B6, and B1. They've been studied for their role in preventing inflammation and cardiovascular disease, and potentially for their role in cancer prevention because they're an excellent source of lycopene. Don't get lulled into a false sense of security. You'll look at these charts and tables and they will list you on there all kinds of unhealthy foods and give you a great glycemic index load for them. Make sure you're fueling your body with whole foods. For example, an 8-ounce Coke has a medium glycemic level rating of 63, but it's not going to give you any fiber, vitamin C, or any other benefits. It'll give you 26 grams of carbohydrates, which is 6 2/3 teaspoons of sugar. The takeaway at this point is that foods low on the glycemic index in general and foods low on the glycemic load level are going to help you to maintain great blood sugar balance, and in doing so are going to protect your brain, your mind, and your body. Let's take a moment and talk about sweeteners and making the smart choice when it comes to those. So you probably know the alternatives as things like Splenda, NutraSweet, Equals, and Sweet and Low. They are the chemically created sweeteners. But did you know that they account for 75% of the negative food reactions created by food additives? Some of the resulting symptoms can cause seizures and even death. They've been reported to cause upwards of 90 symptoms, including changes in mood and vision, convulsions and seizures, sleep problems and insomnia, changes in heart rate, hallucinations, abdominal cramps and pains, memory loss, rashes, nausea and vomiting, fatigue and weakness, dizziness and poor equilibrium, diarrhea, hives, and joint pain. Worse yet, they've been associated with some chronic responses, including multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, ALS, hypoglycemia, memory loss, AIDS, hormonal problems, dementia, epilepsy, brain lesions, Alzheimer's disease, and neuroendocrine disorders. They can even exacerbate diabetes. Aspartame is made up of 40% aspartate, which slowly destroys the neurons. And a study done in 1971 found that it actually created holes in mice's brains. So it just eats holes in the brains. It's also made up of 50% phenylalanine, which is an amino acid normally found in the brain, but in excessive quantities can cause depression, schizophrenia, and leave people susceptible to seizures. It's also made up of 10% methanol, which is also known as wood alcohol or poisoning. And that free methanol is created when it's heated above 86 degrees Fahrenheit, which can occur just simply out of improper storage or as part of a food like Jell-O. So methanol breaks down to create formaldehyde and formic acid in the body. Safe levels are considered to be about 7.8 milligrams per day, but a 1 liter of sweetener containing beverage has 56 milligrams of methanol in it. Symptoms of methanol poisoning include headaches, ringing in the ears, dizziness, nausea, gastrointestinal disturbances, weakness, vertigo, chills, memory lapses, numbness, behavioral disturbances, and vision problems, including blindness. If you're consuming a food or a beverage created in a lab instead of by nature, then you can be assured that your body doesn't recognize it, and that opens the door to short-term and long-lasting health problems for you and your family. If you want to use a sweetener as a replacement for sugar in your diet, I highly recommend sticking to stevia or pure monk fruit extract. Stevia is a non-caloric herb native to Paraguay that's been used as a sweetener for over 1,500 years in South America. It can be found in the supplement aisle of health food stores like Sprouts or online. I like the Pure Leaf brand. It's made right here in Gilbert, Arizona, using cold press extraction methods. I would avoid any sweeteners that are mixed with other ingredients, even if it's stevia, if it's mixed with things like erythritol or dextrose. I would avoid Truvia. One's made by Coca-Cola, and Purevia, made by PepsiCo. Both of those contain additional ingredients. So in conclusion, keeping your blood sugar under control, it's a lifetime commitment that reaps a lifetime of phenomenal results. Not only is it going to protect you from the ravages of diabetes, but it's also going to help you keep your mood on an even keel, and it may even help prevent dementia. We also know that it can contribute to a healthy heart, which helps prevent brain-damaging strokes. Yes, it's going to take a little self-discipline, but by cutting out foods that are high in sugars like cookies and cakes, pies and sugary drinks, or even just really monitoring those and making sure you're keeping that carbohydrate amount, those refined sugars, down to under 16 grams per day, you'll automatically improve your health. Eating your carbs with fiber, protein, and healthy fats will help you to regulate your blood sugar levels, and waiting for 20 minutes before you go back for seconds will allow time for your satiety hormone to kick in so that you don't overeat. I want to thank you for joining me this month to learn about how you can protect your brain and your body from the ravages of refined carbohydrates and sugars. I do wish you all the best in your journey to increased energy, mental focus, and peace of mind.